The world is changing, and this is our plan to embrace it. We want to play our part in resolving the housing crisis. So how are we going to do that at Colne? We're a 3,000 home housing association in East Anglia, so what role do we play? Well, we want to be big picture minded, but we want to stay locally invested. We want to be ambitious. We want to be bigger, better and bolder. But why do we want to do that? We want to do that because we want to build more homes for people that need. Not just social rent, not just affordable rent. We want to also provide homes for sale, outright sale and shared ownership homes. We understand diversity and we understand that everybody has the right to have a home. So you're shortly going to hear a range of sector voices, their views around the world that's changing, their views around the way that the housing sector might need to change, but also their personal views about Colne and its ambition and what it can do differently. You'll hear their views around getting bigger, better and bolder in East Anglia. But you too can have your say, you too can join the conversation. Throughout the year, we're going to be running a conversation. We want to influence, we want to think differently, we want to innovate. We want to show that all of us together can deal with that housing crisis. So please join the conversation. Take the opportunity to have your say.
The UK faces a very large number of profound challenges. I would pick out three in particular. The first is a long-term inability to develop productivity in this country in line with our competitors. So that's an important economic challenge. There are also big social challenges in terms of our ageing population, the need to provide health and social care and housing that is suitable for them. And there's a social political challenge, which is the mounting disengagement of people from politics and government. But I think within all of these things and bound up in them all is the housing market. There is a long-term inability in the British economy to develop the right quantity of housing across all tenures. This has been a challenge for the UK economy for about 40 years now. And I see the development of more housing as a really important part of meeting all of those bigger challenges that I started off with. In East Anglia, the housing sector needs to respond to quite varied housing markets. Some of them, particularly those in reach of London and Cambridge as very vibrant economic areas, face some of the most acute demand challenges in the country. So the housing sector, I think, needs to be, as far as it can, hedge its bets and be able either to operate in an environment where there is very little direct funding for its traditional products and it therefore has to rely on cross-subsidy from other products of market sale and market rent and the like, or indeed pivot back and be able to respond quickly to a rapid increase in government investment in housing for rent. Colne needs to focus on three things, I would say. First of all, strengthening further its emphasis on value for money, so the very maximum resources can be devoted to continuing to provide services to existing residents and to support a capital programme. Secondly, I think it needs to strengthen its expertise in managing different kinds of development. On at least one of the scenarios I've described, to get any development done, it will have to be involved in developing for market sale and market rent, and it needs to think how it does that through its partnership with Iceni or other means. And thirdly, there is a general point about agility. I think the policy environment, the local government environment within which it's working are likely to change very significantly and at very short notice. So within a clear view about its long-term goals, it needs to have tactical agility to make the most of situations as they arise.
Colne Housing Society has real knowledge and expertise of the communities, the towns, the places where it works. It has a real focus on what it does. And I think what we will see with Colne is that it will explore how they can provide new homes for people in different parts of their area, but at different price points. I think housing associations in the future will be the first place you go to if you're looking for a new home, whether that's a home to buy, a home to rent, a penthouse apartment, because housing associations will increasingly be making an offer to everyone at all parts of the market. And I think the great advantage of organisations like Colne is that because they've been around for so long, they really know and understand the communities and neighbourhoods where they work. They don't just invest and go, they stay there and really become part of the fabric of those communities. One of the great advantages that housing associations have as independent organisations is that they can decide for themselves what is the most appropriate way that they should respond to the challenges that they see. The board, the executive team, the staff, the residents, other stakeholders, they will think through the challenges that they see. They'll build partnerships with local authorities, with private developers. They will use their potential to be creative and imaginative. This is really critical that housing associations like Colne continue, because they have this knowledge and expertise in the places where they work that really is not like anyone else. I think that Colne will in the future be building a whole range of different homes, investing in different neighbourhoods, and I think the one thing they need to do better than they're doing now is get out there and tell the story. Because what housing associations do is terrific. They do it as Colne does, brilliantly, but the rest of us don't know enough about it because they're not telling the story. So crack on, do the work, invest in the homes in the neighbourhoods, and then tell people about the success.
I think the uncertainty that there is at the moment around Brexit and a new Prime Minister and new key political leadership is creating some uncertainty with the devolution deal for East Anglia. So the new devolution deal, which has been negotiated, actually brings in huge amounts of capital into the region. So £300 million worth of investment in housing, £200 million of that is actually dedicated to affordable housing in the region. And actually in the Cambridgeshire area, some of that is actually dedicated to affordable rented housing. So from a housing association or a sector perspective, there's a real price to be had there with additional investment coming into the region. I think the housing sector has to be far more nimble than it is. So I guess that's understanding the capacity within the business plan. That means understanding what the maximum impact the organisation can have. I think it's understanding some of the risks in the market and actually stress testing the business plan against those risks. So for example, it's thinking about what would happen to the business if the rents went down, what would happen to the business if house prices went up, what would happen to the business if interest rates go up. So understanding what that does with your business plan, and then actually having a plan of what to do if those things happen. So that means being nimble, that means changing your plan, that means reviewing your strategy regularly and keeping a real close eye on the market to make sure you're protecting the organisation's assets. The other thing the housing sector needs to do is to think more entrepreneurially. So at the moment, the housing sector is a real mix of commercial and social, and I actually see that the commercial side of the business will have to increase in order to deliver the social side of the business. So that means thinking differently, it means using new technology, it means embracing new ideas, and it means really allowing talent into your organisation to take the organisations forward. In the future, Colne will look like an entrepreneurial organisation. So an organisation that is keen to use new ideas, create solutions, work on its efficiency. Colne will also be an organisation, I am sure, that works in partnership with other organisations. They already do that and they have a great track record of doing that. And I think for an organisation like Colne, it can have a much bigger impact if it works with others. Colne will also be an organisation that thinks commercially but acts socially so that it can have the best social impact. I think to meet the challenges, the thing to focus on is the organisational culture. So developing a culture that values innovation, creativity and a new way of doing things. And to do that, you have to create space in an organisation to have that creative thinking. You have to have space in the organisation where you're doing the day job, but actually you're looking to the future. And that culture has to be a culture of flexibility and a culture of collaboration. You know, we know in business that people can copy your strategy and what you want to do, but the thing they can't copy is your culture, and that is the thing that will give any organisation its competitive advantage.
In my life, it's had a massive impact. I mean, it brought, you know, me and my partner were able to live together. Obviously, with my daughter, we've now got another daughter, so that allowed us, because the house is big enough. Literally, the area is a great area where we live, and I wasn't expecting to go anywhere like that. Because when you say housing association, some people go, oh, you know, look at that, you know, think about council housing, and you know, it doesn't necessarily have a great image. But I think these guys, you know, you're very relaxed when you see them, very welcoming, and I think that's been really good. The area now, because obviously they helped us majorly with you know, again, the resident association. It's just brought everyone together. I mean, you know, we got new play equipment for the you know, we've got child's play area in the middle of literally in the middle of the estate. So we've got new play equipment for there. Which is fantastic. Literally, we managed to secure funding for that, and that was really a feel-good thing to get out of it. We got a notice board. It sounds quite small, really silly, but yeah, literally we can now put everything in there. So that's another way, because obviously we've got the internet. Not everyone has the internet. Literally, we go around delivering flyers as well. That's another thing that Colne have helped us, you know, with printers, paper, ink, and you know. It's very basics, but they've given you the, you know, equipment to do different things. So that's really good. Yeah, I think Colne has made a major impact in my life and my area.
The government are currently pursuing a home ownership agenda, and that is absolutely right. It's perfectly legitimate in terms of the government's policies, but I do think that it alienates a sector of our communities, sector of our population, who are now struggling to actually get into being able to rent affordable housing. And we know, don't we, that actually housing is the bedrock of just about everything else. You're in a house, you know, your educational attainment is better. You're in a house, your employment prospects are better. You're in a house, actually the social cohesion of the family is better. So housing is absolutely critical, I think, to the way in which our communities will look and feel in the next 5 to 10 years. We are not currently building enough affordable houses in East Anglia, and I think that is a real issue for us. Certainly I think in local authority terms we've seen homelessness numbers increase quite significantly, and that has a knock-on effect into registered providers who are there to try and pick up some of those homelessness numbers and place them into housing. So for me, I think Colne Housing needs to think quite carefully about how it works with its partners, how it works with other local authorities who do need to look at how we can increase the number of affordable houses available. I think Colne undoubtedly is well positioned at the moment. I do think Colne may well need to consider how it can partner more closely with other organisations and local authorities who are going to look at building affordable housing. I think the only way for us is to build affordable housing outside of what we call the housing revenue account, which is a ring-fenced account for housing purposes. That means that we need to build more houses for sale, we need to build more houses for rent and more houses for affordable housing, so that those people in our communities who currently are really struggling do have somewhere that they can actually be housed. I think Colne, for me, does a really good job at the moment. I think there are probably two areas I would suggest Colne should consider positioning itself in. One is the management capability that Colne has for other registered providers who perhaps are struggling at the moment. So I think that getting alongside them, looking at how you can provide some of that support to them, might even be managing some of their properties, I think is one area that I would look to expand. And as I say, I think on the other side, it's more about different organisations, local authorities actually building more affordable housing. And that means I think Colne could actually look at partnering with those organisations or authorities to actually help them construct that affordable housing, can actually help them manage that affordable housing, but could also look at how Colne can use its housing knowledge in a wider sense, so that if local authorities in particular are looking at developing housing sites, actually can Colne help those local authorities with sale of houses, with rent at market rents, as well as managing the affordable housing that is on the sites.
Demand for our properties is one of the biggest challenges. When I started, we had our own waiting lists. We housed the people that the council didn't house. As demand and everything has changed for housing, we now have tenants that come off the same list as the council. The way Colne, I think, has dealt with this is we've now started to do other types of tenancies, shared ownership, intermediate properties. So we're sort of back to housing all sorts of people as well. New technology has meant that we've been able to improve what we give the services to our customers. The size of the organisation is definitely a key change. There was 1,000 properties when I started. We now have over 3,000. The area where we work has also increased. The staffing, the number of staffing we've increased has also been a change in the organisation. When I started, we had properties in Colchester and Malden. Now we have them in Tendring, Baber, Chelmsford, Uttlesford, and it's continuing to grow. So it's the different communities we serve, the different areas, the different people in the community. when I started, I think we were known as we provided housing. That was it. I now think people see us more as just a landlord. I think they come for us for information, for assistance. And our income management team provide really good information for people. And we try and get involved in other areas as well as just the housing. I think becoming a manager was definitely a career highlight. I went from one day I was working with people as colleagues, the next day I was the manager. And I think my biggest career highlight is the team that I've built. I've got a very strong, stable team. I've got 2 members of staff that have been here 20 years, another one that's 19, and even my shortest serving member of staff is 9 years now, so we must be doing something right. But it's nice to have that support from the team. I think one of the things that I'm really pleased of, and it sort of benefited all our customers, was when we changed the way we could get people to pay their rent. They used to only be able to pay into the bank or coming in here. I was involved with setting up the all-pay systems so that they can have cards, they can pay in post offices, pay points, they can pay over line, they can ring up and pay, and I just think that gave them a lot more information and ability to do things. I think just the way Colne has developed and the properties that provide is definitely a highlight, just to see all the people that we've been able to help. And I think from one of the things when I've been here so long is there's been a few customers where you've actually seen that we've housed the children of the original customers that we had, which is definitely a highlight.
I think the UK faces some significant challenges, particularly around housing. We've got large social housing and affordable housing waiting lists. Certainly in Colchester, it's between 3,000 and 5,000 at any time. So I think the supply of housing, in particular affordable housing, but also an ageing population, so adult social care and homes that are appropriate for the elderly, are going to be really important as we approach this decade. The affordable housing sector is already changing. We're seeing more houses being built in the affordable housing sector. It's harder on brownfield sites, it's easier on greenfield sites to allow a proportion of housing to be built. But we are seeing houses being built, and some of the smaller providers that are more fleet of foot, providing better value for money, are actually building houses and ensuring that that affordable housing provision is available. Well, Colne Housing is already making a number of the changes that are necessary, being pragmatic, fleet of foot, ensuring that they take a community-based approach. But I think being efficient is one of the key measures, but also looking at building more houses, but also tackling some of the issues around adult social care and an elderly population, and ensuring that there is that accommodation for the elderly that need that support. Well, 2 of the main issues the UK faces over the next 5 to 10 years. One is housing supply. We have a massive shortage, in particular in East Anglia, a number of people wanting housing, in particular affordable housing and social housing, so that's one issue. The second is an ever-ageing population. By 2020, there'll be an extra 1 million over 70s, and that means we're going to need to tackle accommodation for the elderly and supported living. Well, the housing sector in East Anglia, there's still considerable shortages, and that is only going to continue, which is why it's really important that organisations like Colne continue to build affordable housing and continue to increase the supply, especially around the elderly and around sheltered accommodation, which we're going to see an increased need for over the next 5 to 10 years.
The housing sector in East Anglia is hugely affected by London. Therefore, we are seeing increasing house prices as the London effect sort of ripples outwards. The shortage of housing in London is very acute. We're seeing local authorities in London placing people in temporary accommodation increasingly throughout all of our districts in Essex. And I say for the east of England, which is a high value area in broad terms compared to the rest of the country, I think we can only see that continuing to happen. But dealing with the extra demand that arises from people who are leaving London as well as people who already live here, we can barely meet the need from people who are currently here. But as that sort of ripple effect continues, I think we are in for very difficult times ahead. Colne I think Colne has to use its advantages and not see them as disadvantages. The danger is that because it's relatively small, it sees that as a drawback. And as we watch organisations merging to form mega providers with over 100,000 homes in their portfolio, an organisation with a relatively small stock can appear to be just a minnow that can achieve nothing. And actually what it can achieve is a lot of local focus, much more flexibility over what it offers. It can enter into agreements that might be a one-off thing that it can do at one local authority level that works locally. It might not work next door even because of differences in the way that rents are paid, benefit system operates, all the sort of vagaries of the system that are so complex. An organisation that's fleet of foot and flexible and willing to work and willing to put themselves out to find out what is needed at a local level has a huge part to play. If it tries to mimic the other organisations with mega stock and take the same sort of attitude of growth at all costs, well, you know, I don't know, we wouldn't really be interested in what the organisation was there for. It wouldn't be fulfilling its function, it wouldn't be doing what it can do. Colne could be an organisation willing to pilot ideas. It could be an organisation that comes to us with things that can be done. Because it is a relatively small organisation, it can be flexible over what it can offer, and it can make a lot of difference at a local level that the bigger organisations are just not interested in providing for us. What we'd like is sort of innovation that can meet a variety of needs. We've always really valued the fact that Colne has become involved in some of the more difficult parts of our housing issues, dealing with the private sector leasing schemes, which some of the bigger organisations just completely abandoned. And they've worked with us over many years to try and find ways to make it work, and that we may have to face up to putting extra subsidy into it to make it work, but we need that conversation, and we're really there to have that sort of conversation with Colne. So we have to have an organisation which is responsive to our needs, and in the past, Colne has been. It has been exactly that. I hope it's still that in the future.
Colne has an amazing opportunity to help deal with some of the changes and the crises that are taking place around us. For Colne, we've positioned our organisation to be bigger, better and bolder to be able to do that. We want to enable independent living, and the way that we will do that is by being the thought leaders in the region, by supporting others to think more innovatively and working together to provide solutions. We want to use our strong balance sheet to be able to provide more homes of different tenure. We want to do open market sale. We want to continue to be a private sector leasing landlord. We want to build affordable homes. We want to subsidise social homes of the future. We want to continue to invest in our communities. We think it's really important. There's no point building homes if you don't have a community and if you don't have a heart to those homes. And that's something that Colne will continue to do. But we'll do it from a position of value for money and efficiency and purpose. We'll do it with really clear outcomes, not just because it feels nice, but because it's good and it's the right thing to do. We will focus our resources in the right way on the things that our communities need. But within that, we also will keep a real focus on our services and on our people. Building homes is critical, but also supporting the people in those homes is critical. So for Colne, that means that we need to fundamentally rethink our service model. We need to be fleet of foot. We need to be an agile organisation to be able to deal with the changes ahead of us. To do that, we need to understand what the needs are of our people and not assume that we know what those needs are. So our future will be a needs-assessed and needs-based future. We'll provide services that are absolutely hands-on for the most vulnerable. And for others, we'll provide services that are a little bit more hands-off, are a little bit more arm's length through a digital offer that's a really powerful digital offer but actually provides people with what they need. And a lot of people don't need their landlord on their doorsteps every single day, and that's what our residents have told us. So we will be investing in that digital future to make sure that we can keep value for money at our heart to deliver more, but in the right way. Colne needs to lead with a commercial head, but deliver with a social heart. Colne needs to be really agile to be able to face that future. We need to invest in our people. We need to make sure that our people have got the right tools to deliver the services that are needed. We need to really understand the services that are going to be needed for the future and provide those in a strong and confident way, but not be frightened to make difficult decisions. We need to make sure that our services are progressive, and we need to make sure that we adopt the digital revolution to be able to drive those services forward in a cost-effective and value-for-money way. We need to carry on being influencers in the region, building more homes, influencing the way that homes are built, thinking about new products, thinking about the way that we can support people through affordability challenges to get into homes of whatever tenure. The housing markets in East Anglia are changing significantly. East Anglia is changing significantly. East Anglia will be affected by devolution and locally driven solutions, locally driven leadership, locally driven politics.
I feel like this is a Groundhog Day. It takes me back to 1970. I'm living again the experience that we had in the early 1970s, when there was a huge housing problem. Going back to what we thought about in the 60s and early 70s, about local people making provision of local housing, that has got to come back. That's the way it has to be done. In those early days, there were small groups of very dedicated people. I'm thinking in Colchester, Bernard Brett, who set up a small housing association to serve the local people who had a particular need. And it was very successful. Colne developed well. We had a very good local relationship in those days with Colchester Borough Council, Malden District Council and tendering. But I tend to feel that the localism of provision has disappeared. What I think is important for the future is that we provide local homes for local people. We've got to go back to those principles. And I've got certain views as to how that might happen, which has developed over the last 2 or 3 years, that we've got to revert to localism. I support entirely the coalition government's provision for localism, and I think we've got to develop on that. The other essential part is the coalition government brought through very important legislation in the Care Act of 2014, where we must get cooperation on housing for vulnerable people, especially older people and people with learning disabilities, work together with the social care departments of county councils and those authorities, and also work very closely with the NHS. Well, Colne currently has a role in managing almshouses. You know, going back to my thoughts about these huge housing associations, nobody knows who's behind them. But with almshouse charities, the local trustees who run them know the residents. And there's an easy correlation between the two. And Colne, as a locally based housing association, has the same ethos of knowing its residents and working with them easily. In construction, we need to have new construction, and we need to have almshouses which are homes for life. I mean, it appears to me that government's policy now is strictly based on providing funds for housing to buy. We must not forget the needs that, you know, probably 15% of the population who will never, ever be able to afford to buy.
So thank you for listening. We really hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed making it. I'd like to thank all of the collaborators, my wonderful staff, our residents, and all of our support partners for making this happen. So please don't forget, it is now your time to join the conversation. You can do so on social media or via our website, and remember, it'll be for the rest of this year. Join the conversation and have your say today.